There are those who go about the normal way of communication, going about their day, doing the taxes, doing the chores, communicating all their thoughts in a normal way, not thinking about it too much, very, very outward, extroverted thoughts. And then there are those who are different from the rest, whose thoughts are very deep, very profound. They think in very, very different ways, have a different perspective. They tend to see the ending before the beginning, and they tend to go back over their thoughts very easily. They're living a lifelong struggle where they've been told that they cannot speak their mind. And now they are stepping into their authenticity with their communication, speaking what they really feel and think and believe. And when they do this, they can really tap into the gems that they have and the skills of communication that they really, truly have. In this episode of the Cosmic Sky Astrology Podcast, I'm going to be discussing Mercury Retrograde in the birth chart. This is very, very interesting. I'm going to go very, very deep in this episode. This is a deep dive, which is so fitting for Mercury Retrograde because they often like to take deep dives into things that's not the shallow, just, that's fine learning information like that. They like to go deep, so let's just go deep in this video. So stick around because I'm going to get into a lot of very interesting insights about Mercury retrograde individuals. But first, how do I know that I have Mercury retrograde in my chart? Well, because if you go to your natal chart calculator, astro.com or Cafe Astrology or another one, and if you see an uppercase or a lowercase r right next to your Mercury placement, that's how you know you were born during a Mercury retrograde. So, I want to hold space for the people who have Mercury retrograde in this video. This is a deep video. You're not here just for a quick interpretation. What do I need to know? I don't do those videos anymore. I don't do those types of videos anymore. I want to really, really allow for some compassion and allow for some meaning to come into this placement. So welcome if you have this placement, or if you're just interested to learn about this placement, welcome. I'm so thrilled that you're here. Let us delve in. So, Mercury retrograde, not Mercury in retrograde. We often make that mistake saying, Mercury is in retrograde, but really it's just Mercury retrograde. That's what it's astrologically called. Now, Mercury retrograde means it's going backwards. Retro, you're going like retro, meaning going back to the old days, how things were in the old days. You're going back in time. And so when Mercury is retrograde, it goes back over degrees of one or two signs that it's in. And so just to say that, Mercury is either in the sign before the sign the sun is in, the sign that the sun is in, or the sign afterward. So it's one sign behind or in front of the sun, or in the same sign as the sun. That's very, very important to note. So it appears to be going backward from our vantage point on Earth, based on the Earth's path around the sun, but that's just our perception. That's just our perception. Mercury kind of moves in a very, very interesting way, the astronomical details of which I am not the authority on. But now, this is so important because, when Mercury is moving retrograde, when any planet really is going retrograde, it's closer to the Earth than it would otherwise be. And therefore, its power is intensified. We feel its energy more prominently in our lives. We feel it stronger. We feel it like, oh wow, Venus going retrograde. I really feel like I want to buy all these things. I'm really feeling loving and harmonious. Or Mars retrograde. Ooh, I'm feeling really motivated, even though that's the time when, typically you feel not so motivated and like you can't take action on that. And Mars retrogrades are very tough periods, but there's silver linings to them. And the next one that comes, I'll go in depth about that in 2027. The next one starts around the middle of January of 2027. So more on that when we get to that point. But anyway, Mercury is closer to the Earth than it would otherwise be during a Mercury retrograde. So therefore, in your chart, Mercury is going to be a more powerful planet. Now, I actually, here's an interesting story. My two parents both have Mercury retrograde in their charts. I was almost born with Mercury retrograde in my chart, because my natal Mercury was stationary in my chart, standing still in the sky before it turns retrograde. Therefore, Mercury is pretty powerful in terms of my chart. Like, my communications are really powerful, and I can really put myself out into the world with my communication as I'm doing now. It's really, a huge part of who I am. And, the themes of Mercury can be more prominent in that case when Mercury is moving closer to the Earth. So I just find that very interesting. Like, I was hours away from being born with Mercury retrograde. So, now, Mercury goes retrograde for 3 to 4 weeks at a time. You have to count the pre-shadow, when Mercury enters the shadow zone where it starts moving at a certain degree, and then it just moves, stops, stands still, goes back over that path, then stations again, and then the post-shadow, or the integration phase, happens when we're integrating everything that we reviewed over the retrograde, and then we move forward again, and then we go past that point that it moved retrograde at, and then we just move on from there. Like, we have to count those 2 days. It can really be retrograde, in its pre-shadow, retrograde, post-shadow. I'm going to say around about 60 days. Let me see here. So, I may not be accurate about that, but I think that's what, through reading, I kind of came across. But anyway, it goes retrograde for 3 to 4 weeks at a time, around about 20 to 21 days, roughly. Sometimes it can vary. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit under, or a little bit over. Like I know the usually the retrogrades around April, May, and June are longer than the other retrogrades. For some reason, they just last longer. And then the ones like in the fall or in the winter last for a shorter amount of time. So that's what I found out of, because I went through and I put in all the dates of the Mercury retrograde, and so I've come to that conclusion through putting in from 1900 up to now. Like, I sat through and put down all these Mercury retrograde dates because I was just looking for something to do. And I was curious, so I wrote down all the Mercury retrograde dates from 1900 to now, and that's what I have found. So, now when Mercury is retrograde, brings about a lot of stuff. Now, Mercury retrograde, when Mercury is retrograde, it's not operating in its full power. It's kind of like Mercury is, like how bear is going to hibernation in the winter time. You can almost think about it like that, like how a bear sleeps. Bear shuts down, sleeps, and goes into reflection. Like when Mercury is retrograde, we go into reflection. Like we go introverted. Mercury is not operating in its full power. It's kind of asleep. Like when it wakes up again, it goes retrograde. So normally Mercury is awake, but then Mercury retrograde is when it goes to sleep. And an astrologer, the astrologer Michael Lennox, had a beautiful, very, very interesting interpretation of Mercury retrograde. How it's like when Mercury goes retrograde, we're in like we're sleep living. That's how I'm referring it to. But it's like, when we go through our days, we get all this stimulus and all this information. We have all these conversations and all this. But it's like stop the bus. We have to process this. We have to review this, and like when we sleep, we allow ourselves things to process and things get built in the right places, and like that's the kind of thing, and then we wake up again fresh and clear and new again. So that's how you can think of it. But so when Mercury goes retrograde, there's often a lot of miscommunications. Somebody said something and it got misinterpreted the wrong way. Somebody said something and somebody didn't take it the right way, or the communication wasn't clear or direct. Things break down during a Mercury retrograde. Very, very easily. Because Mercury rules technology and also communication systems. Like Mercury rules our communication systems, like how we exchange messages from one site to the other site, and how during Mercury retrograde, this does not function as effectively as it normally does, as ideally as we normally would want it to be, or we're more hyper aware of the miscommunications during Mercury retrograde, of the loss of exchanges of information, of the kind of snafus that happen with technology, especially. So technology doesn't work as effectively. That's it's not a good idea to buy a new computer or phone during Mercury retrograde, because that you never know when that would have got invented. You may not see the details clearly of that. I mean, there's a whole story of that. I'm not going to go into that, but yeah. So, but Mercury retrogrades present us with an opportunity to do all the words. Like if you put RE in front of any word, that's very, very good to do during Mercury retrograde. That's a great way to spend your Mercury retrograde. So review, reflect is the time where we are reflecting. So, review, reflect, research, all those rewords. So, it's going back over, doing it again, basically. So, researching things, like learning, into different things, like going deep and investigating, that's great to do during Mercury retrograde. Reflect. Review. We're going, during Mercury retrograde, we're more introspective. We go more inside of ourselves, and we look at all the pieces of ourselves. We can do a lot of deep shadow work during Mercury retrograde, especially the one coming up this fall in Scorpio. So we're more introverted during this time. We reevaluate things. We redefine things. We reorganize and relook at our life again. We revise and we integrate. That's the highway to Mercury retrograde, is bringing things into wholeness. And integration is also being willing to see what we're afraid to see, being willing to see what is in our unconscious, in our deep, kind of hidden areas of what we consider to be our mind, really. So we're accepting it and moving through it, and not denying it or not pushing it down. So we're more introspective during Mercury retrograde, and we go into our unconscious mind. Like when Mercury goes retrograde, it's basically we're taking a deep dive into our unconscious mind. It is a time of metacognition. In fact, that's maybe the title I'm going to call my Mercury and Cancer podcast. A time of profound emotional metacognition. That's what I plan to title that podcast episode. Around about the 29th of June is when Mercury goes retrograde in Cancer. So we're more introverted during this time. We're more looking at our inner self. So, and so I've already described a lot of the people who have Mercury retrograde in their charts already by doing this. So that tells you a lot already. So all these themes they're working with in their life, like all the Mercury retrograde themes, you have your whole life to work through all this. They have their whole life to, look at these themes and, reflect on them and work with them. So, people who have Mercury retrograde in their charts are more intuitive. This could have been me. Easily, but nope. So, but I think that Mercury went retrograde by, in my chart, by progression, which I'll get to later, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. That, I'll say that toward the end when I talk about that. But anyway, you're more in touch with your intuition. If you have Mercury retrograde in your natal chart, you're more in touch with your inner senses of what's going on inside of you, what's going on internally with you. What is actually going on in your soul, in your spirit, what's telling you, this is the direction to go in, and this is what feels right to do, and just going with what feels right, as opposed to just relying on the logical mind and the what to do and how to do it, and how to go about your life, and basically how to function using the left brain. They're often more right-brain individuals. So I just want to say that. So, if Mercury is retrograde natally, and I should say that it's the time where during Mercury retrograde, it's a time where we trust our intuition more. We go through what just feels right, as opposed to just relying on the logical mind all the time. So it goes both ways here. So it's already going both ways in this video. So, if your Mercury is retrograde natally in your birth chart, then I've already said that. So now it impacts roughly 20% of the population. A lot of people were born with this, but not everybody. So because of that fact, I don't know how popular this video is going to get when I put it out. So, so the planet Mercury basically is the planet that just takes what we think, takes our thoughts, our ideas, and puts it into something that other people can understand through communication. Like, we communicate our thoughts to others, really, so that they can understand what we're thinking. So they can understand what's going on in our minds, where they can understand what we've learned, what we want to share, what we want to say, and how we want to say it is defined by Mercury, and how we communicate is, Mercury rules how you communicate. So whatever placement Mercury is in your chart shows that, and in a way where everybody can understand it, in a way where the people in your environment can understand it, is that's how that's because we communicate, because we want others to understand it. So Mercury is the messenger of the gods. And this is very, very important for Mercury. The story of Mercury is huge for Mercury retrograde people, because in mythology, Mercury traveled back and forth between the above world, the inner, the earthly world, our daily life, how we go about in this reality, the towns, the shops, the communications, the conversations, the books that we read, the interactions that we have, etc. Well, look, all the normal average day-to-day type experiences that we go through. And it travels then to the underworld. And the underworld is also known as the inner world. And the underworld is a place filled of death, filled of where souls go to die, really. That's Pluto also, but, basically deals with the unconscious mind. And the underworld is where all unconscious thoughts are, things that we've hidden or repressed or buried within ourselves, the deeper, more spiritual thoughts that we have. So, now, Mercury retrograde individuals do not think in linear terms. They do not think in like A, then B, then C, then D. We're starting here, we're starting next, we're then moving to this step, then we're moving to that step. Instead, they tend to see the end before the beginning. They tend to see, see the conclusion of something prior to then seeing the beginning of it, and they work backwards throughout the thing. It's a very, very complicated thing, and only if you were in their minds you'd understand, and if you were talking to them, then you would understand how their mind works. It's fascinating to look at how their mind works. Really, it is, especially the sign that colors that Mercury retrograde. And some Mercury retrogrades are going to be more expressive and communicative than others. So that's very, very important. So they don't think in starting at the beginning and working your way to the end. They everything comes together and time sort of flows into one kind of thing. And it starts at the beginning, it starts in the middle, and then it just kind of, not the regular pattern, it starts at the end and works its way to the beginning. That's kind of them. So they take all the details into account, basically, as they go backwards. So, for those with Mercury retrograde, they can really be advocates for mental liberation. They are here to liberate us from our traditional, stuck, multiple, multiplus, and very, very normal and average standard way of thinking. They're here to break us free from that. And they live outside of the normal boundaries of what we speak to and what we learn about. They're not bound by normal conversations, normal ideas, normal communications, and learning things in the average way. They have a very, very unique way of learning and communicating and thinking. It's different from everybody else. And that also depends on the sign in the house and aspects made to it. It's all relative to the chart. This is just a very, very general look at what Mercury retrograde means in your chart. So, now people with Mercury retrograde are really, really reflective. Very, very introspective, very, very internal, very, very that much. Now, it may actually take them longer to respond to something. Like, normal average, everybody says, like, hey, let's, do this. No, I have a quick answer for this. No, I have an answer for that right away. No. With Mercury retrograde people, typically, someone asks them a question, and then they sit with it for a little bit, and they think about it, and then they meditate on it, and then they respond with something so deep, so unlike you would expect, and so resonant toward them. It's like you've just taken what is deep within you and you've translated it into words. That's what they're ultimately here to do. So, responding to something, it may take longer for them to process information and process questions because it's Mercury retrograde. Mercury indicates some challenges with communication, challenges with learning. It may take a lot more work to blend into the mercurial areas or the intellectual arenas of life. That may be a huge possibility with this. They have the tendency to go back over things. It's very, very natural for them to be moving on a certain path, and then it's just their natural mind, their natural instinct, and what they naturally do is they review it and go back over it and look at it again. And I think that they're meant to do this. When it comes to their verbal expression, like going back over what they've said to see, to check if it was accurate, to check if it was kind or meaningful, whatever. Communication, they go back over their thinking, they review their thinking. They're very, very metacognitive people. They think about their thinking. And I want to look up metacognition. Thinking about thinking, basically. The active planning and evaluation or reevaluation of your mental processes. So that is what it is about. So I wanted to bring that in here because that is important when it comes to this placement. So they're very, very metacognitive people. They go back over how they learn things. Did they learn things correctly? Did they learn what they completely needed to learn? Did they learn all the details of this? Did they learn it in the proper way? Did they get all the facts and information down? All that. Do they really understand what they're learning? And reviewing how they're being understood by others. Like a common question is like, are you hearing me? Do you understand what I'm saying? Are you really, hearing what I have to say? Like, that's a common question for Mercury retrograde individuals to ask themselves and ask others, really, because, you're in conversation with others. So, so understanding the world and being understood by others. You're really, really reviewing this really, really strongly. So they go back over that. And they review their exchanges. that they have with others. Just see if that interaction was meant for them, the right use of their time and acceptance. So they also review their exchanges from you and others. And they tend to replay things again and again. And in a way, especially Mercury in Capricorn, I think tends to go back over and dwell on negatives. Because that's what kind of Capricorn does in the low level. So they tend to replay things over and over again that makes them feel really, really unsafe or bad about themselves or just feeling like the world is not a kind place and an accepting place of what they have to communicate. So for some people who have Mercury retrograde, their minds are very, very fast, very electric, very, on. They're very, very mercurial. They think in a very, very fast, intelligent, bright, genius, and quick way, sharp way. For others, it may take longer to process things. Your mind might be slower. You might learn things slower. You might speak in a slower way. One of the symptoms I did not check off on my psychological evaluations that I take, moving and speaking so slowly that others didn't understand. And so, but regardless of if your mind is sharp or if your mind is not as sharp, the communication is always going to be deep communication. So that's what you're kind of left with. So you pick up things, saying that your mind is very, very quick. For Mercury retrograde people, they actually pick up things very, very quickly. They pick up things really, really rapidly. They pick up information super duper quick. Like they learn something, they, remember it and, they keep it, in their memory and, they just, hold on to it. And they're very, very fast, smart learners. And they don't need, a lot of the time, they don't really need a whole lot of practice and reinforcement to sort of learn that thing over and over. Like they don't have to go back over it and, practice it, learn it here and, they forget it and they have to learn it again because they don't understand it enough. They do it, then, it doesn't take them as much time to learn things. It takes them very, very quick amount of time to learn things. So I didn't want to confuse you here. This is all depending on your chart, your personal life, the other factors in your chart. But just to say that Mercury retrograde, you do think very, very quickly with Mercury retrograde. And for an average Mercury retrograde person, this is actually what you end up with, especially in Mercury in Gemini or Aquarius. So, you learn things just kind of one and done. Like you learn it, then you remember it, then you catch on to it. So, I think Mercury retrograde in Cancer, and Mercury in Pisces especially, are the water signs. Mercury in Scorpio is really, 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 really deep. But Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, if I didn't say the retrograde there. So, they can easily touch you and impact you on an emotional level. Like what they say is so emotionally potent. Like they can say something and it is from the depths of emotion. They put a lot of emotion into it. It's like the subject matter is emotional, or they're speaking about it in a very, very real, raw, authentic, emotional way. And then it comes out. And they communicate it tactfully. Like I think that those with Mercury retrograde are genuinely, generally tactful people in their communication, because they're very, very aware. They're very, very self-aware people. Like if Mercury is retrograde and you're reviewing it, they're hyper aware of their communication. So they're going to be more reflective, and then they're going to be more tactful because they're more aware of it. They're more cognizant of it. So they may express themselves differently than everybody else. Their approach, their approach to communication and learning may be different than anybody else. Like, we all communicate and think differently, but their approach is just not the same. It sticks out. Their approach, they approach it like they are taking what is on the inside of them. Like they're, they take what is unconscious inside of them, and they put it out for the whole world to see. Like, they don't just communicate from just the logical mind. Oh, I saw this, and I am communicating what I see and what I observe and what I think and what I just on the surface, left brain, average, way. No, it comes from their unconscious mind, and they communicate these thoughts from their more unconscious, like they are tuned in and tapped into what is going on unconsciously. Like, this is like Mercury retrograde people are so fascinating to study and so fascinating to be with, because their communication is very, very deep and unconscious. And I am, as I said before, I'm surrounded by two parents who have Mercury retrograde in their chart. So I, have this golden opportunity to really, really get to know them in that way. So, the communication style is really unique and really apart from the rest. So, also, whatever information so let's say that they learn something externally. What they're going to do is they're going to integrate it. They're not going to just respond just by understanding it just on the mental level. Like, they're going to take the information and they're going to plug it into their unconscious. They're going to reflect on, is this true for me? What inside me resonates with this information? What inside me can I say in response to this question or this idea or this piece of information? Like they come from very much the inside out when it comes to their communication. They turn inward to really, really analyze it. So, in childhood, you're very, very active. And I'm going to go through some, kind of the story of how this plays out later, but in childhood, well, just to start out here, in childhood, they may have been very, very active, very, spontaneous, very, very, not sitting still for a long period of time. It's very, very hard for them to sit still. There's a restlessness with them. And, they often are very, very hyperactive as children. So they move a lot. They move around a lot. In their, kind of way about, what they do, really, is, and they may also have short attention spans. So they may be reading or watching something, then they may lose interest and focus on something else, just as quickly. So their sense of humor is very, very quirky. They have a very, very unique sense of humor. It's hard for them to sit still, as I've said. There's always this need to be always doing something, always stimulating their mind in some way with a podcast, a book, a conversation, a video, music. whatever it is. They always need to stimulate, like there's this constant need to stimulate themselves, to talk, to listen, to engage their minds in some way. Like they constantly need to engage their minds more seriously and at a higher, more extreme level than a lot of people. Like it's very, very, it's more extreme. Like this is an extreme need to engage their mind. So now, as they age, they get the message: you can't speak your mind. You can't share your thoughts. You can't talk to what's really going on inside of you emotionally. And I have Lilith in Gemini, so Mercury rules Gemini. I have Lilith there, so Lilith in Gemini is very, very similar to Mercury Retrograde. Like I relate to a lot of that going on. Although as a child, I had parents that were very, very supportive and let me be my creative, authentic self in the way that I wanted to be. So I'm very, very blessed, very fortunate to have parents who did that. With videos that I filmed and everything like that. So they're taught to hold in their thoughts. And this results in feeling irritated. There's this feeling of like, I have so many ideas. Like they have so many great ideas. But to actually speak to them and communicate them and put them out there is hard, because it's like catching a cloud. Like they're not grasping the way to do it. It's like they can barely do it. Like they have all these things and maybe communicating some and not communicating others, or not communicating in the way that's most authentic to them and what they think about it in their minds as being, what the ideas translate to them in their minds. And so it's very, very difficult for them to get the information out, put the information out, share that information. So they struggle to speak their mind and get their thoughts out there. Sharing what they feel, their emotions, what they deeply want, like all these things, the intellectual, the emotional, what they desire inside of them. It can be where they struggle to communicate that. So they learn to speak their minds more easily as they grow older. Like as they age, they're finding that they're tapping in. Like the older they get, the easier it is to engage their minds. So they start off very, very bright and mental and intellectual and all that. Then they get shut down, told that they can't speak their mind, and then they basically step into bringing more harmony to what's going on inside of them in their external reality. And the thing is to balance both, like how Mercury balanced the earthly realm versus the underworld realm. Like you're meant to balance what is going on in your deep unconscious and what is also the out there reality with the information, the stimulus, and the conversations and the subjects and all of that. They've been told to be quiet or withdraw. Like if you have this placement, at some point, were you told just that you couldn't speak? That you couldn't, that you had to be quiet? Like I really, really feel for you at this, because I can't imagine being told that I can't speak my mind. That is tough to go through. And I have a lot of compassion of you for that, of not being allowed to speak your mind, speak your ideas. Like I get you, and I really, really feel a lot of empathy for that. So they have been told to withdraw when it comes to their communication, to hold it in, to not let it out. So they begin by being very, very intelligent, very, very bright people, very, very expressive when it comes to sharing their thoughts, and they're very, very high energy, very, very active. Like their energy is just on. They're more emotional in terms of their communication, and they're really, really talkative. They talk a lot. Then they are told that they need to censor themselves. No, I'm not going to push my brain to try to imagine what it's like to be censored. I'm just going to feel that, lean into that feeling like it's very, very difficult when you're told to just shut down your mind and shutting down your mercurial energy and communicative energy. That is really, really tough. Very, very tough, because it's like not being nurtured enough. Not being allowed to just express your mind, express your thoughts. Like, that is rough. And I really feel that. I really feel for you. A lot of you had that experience. So, you're told to be quiet. You're told to shut it down. And this results in depression and anxiety that you have about communicating and sharing information, interacting with others. You may have difficulties when it comes to self-expression. Struggling with speaking your mind because of this. That it may become hard to just like feel like it's not safe to share my ideas. It's not safe to share what's on my mind. And so there's this fear of speaking your mind, where just the idea of like attempting to communicate and speak these ideas at this stage in your life, like when you're an adolescent especially, I'm talking about that, it can be where it really, really scares you. Like it really, really scares you, and it makes you very, very uncomfortable to just share your mind, share your ideas. You may have a lot of miscommunications in your life. And the reason for this is because you withhold things. You withhold information, and you withhold your thoughts inside of you. So what you do is you try to just blend in and dim your light. I did a video today on my Will Me podcast about not dimming my light. Then I'm realizing the connection to Mercury Retrograde and that video that I did, which I thought it didn't have any connections to it at all, but now I'm realizing, wow. So if you want to hear my true thoughts and opinions on dimming your light, and not dimming your light to be accepted, then go listen to that episode on the Real Me podcast that on my YouTube channel, to hear my own personal thoughts with that. So, but you try to go about in the world by saying as little as possible, saying only what you need to say, saying things very, very briefly, holding in your real feelings, your real thoughts, and just saying what you need to say just to get by. Saying what you need to say just to function and survive and get your messages across for what people really need to understand, as opposed to just what you want them to understand and what you want them to know, or sharing what you authentically want to share inside of you when it comes to your communication. You're withholding that and not letting out this gem these gems of knowledge and wisdom and insight that you have. You hold it in. And it's time to unlock it. Unlock that cage and let the lion out. Like break free from that cage that you are in when it comes to communication. Like that's what you're working through in this life. So, those who have Mercury retrograde are not bad people at all. And I'm really going deep with it here. Well, you can't just, say like all Scorpios are evil or all Capricorns are pessimistic, whatever. You can't just rule these things out. Like you have to go deep, and you really have to have a humble, curious, and seasoned official look at the astrology. So, you try to say as little as possible so that you are accepted, so that you fit in, so that you're not rejected for what you have to say. And this ties in perfectly to what I was saying on that video, because it's like I'm sharing my ideas and being told that I can't share my ideas because people won't like it and all that. Well, that's just going to hold me back from just shining my light and being authentic. So you see the connection between that video that I did and this one. Those concepts, and I'd recommend that you go see that video. And I keep saying that. So it's very important that you meet somebody in your life that allows you to express yourself authentically. Express your verbal communication authentically, and communicate and creates this very nurturing and loving environment where you can freely and openly speak your mind. That's what you ultimately want on a soul level. So gradually, you become more of your authentic self. You get back in touch with your feelings. At a later stage in your life, around your 20s, so to speak. So, you get back in touch with your feelings, you come home to yourself, you speak your mind and share your thoughts and feelings at this point in your life. You're more willing and brave to do this, and you don't hold in the truth. And you don't hold it in, you just let it out. So, the very last stage is becoming a really savvy communicator. Becoming a really smart communicator with what you have to say and what you have to do and all that. So, it may take you more time to read and thoroughly complete tasks. That may be a really strong possibility here, because Mercury retrograde is not going to be so easy to just lower things very easily. Like completing tasks and reading and doing all that may be more difficult. It's very good to look at what you're unconscious of. Now you may think on a very different level than anybody else. Like your thinking is very different from anybody else. You see things not the typical way. You see things in different perspectives, in a whole new angle, and a whole new perspective. Well, we all have different perspectives over things. Your perspective is especially unique. You can be very highly talented in anything intellectual, such as writing, communicating, presenting, etc. So communication might be harder for you to work on this lifetime. That may be an area of work that you're working on, as I said before. You may also learn information differently than others. You may, very easily do this, where you, learn information differently than everybody else. You interpret it and you understand it in a different kind of way. So, your energy is, all it is just repressed energy. Energy that's pushed down, and like mental energy, like you push down and repress what you have to say in your thoughts because you're afraid of others not liking it. And you express this information in a rather vague way, or like a zigzag that just winds around things instead of like directly getting to the point, around communication. Now, let's talk about Mercury retrograde transits first of all. Some feel, because like, what happens when you have Mercury retrograde in your chart and there's a Mercury retrograde transit that goes on. So, some people who have Mercury retrograde in their charts, really, really easily feel that they are more like themselves. Like they feel more, they feel more like themselves during, because Mercury is like retrograde. They're used to living with Mercury retrograde, so all those things are very, very easily, and it's really how the world should be and not what it normally is. It's a time where they come out of their shell more and open themselves up and communicate more openly and freely, as opposed to holding in a lot of that information that they have. Where finally, it's like the universe understands them. The universe gives them a gift. For others, they don't really feel particularly different during Mercury retrograde. Now, it all depends on how your particular Mercury placement is interacting with your natal chart. If it's making difficult aspects, like a Mercury retrograde could not negatively affect you as much if that particular Mercury retrograde isn't making all kinds of difficult aspects, such as conjunctions or squares or oppositions to planets or placements or points in your chart. So, it can be where it is where maybe those planets are negatively aspecting your Mercury placement, then they're making all kinds of negative aspects and all that. So that may be a really, really big thing that might change the story here. To your personal planets, basically. It's, mainly to your personal planets. Now, at some point, you have Mercury retrograde in your chart, but it's not always going to be retrograde. There's something called progressions, which is like, how the planets in your natal chart, move, and the story of how they move on during your life, and how you experience different energies of those placements in your life based off of the direct motion, the forward motion, and the changing of signs. So, your natal Mercury retrograde could very, very easily go direct by progression. And so when Mercury goes direct by progression, you'll find that, wow, it's easier for me to communicate. Things, just come together for you, like the pieces of the puzzle come together into something whole, and like all those pieces that were separate, that were just separate pieces that didn't have a connection really, are put together to make a whole. And like, okay, now I can bring forth my ideas. Now I can communicate effectively. Now I can speak my mind. Now I can speak my truth. Now I can learn what I want to learn about. And communication is really, really up in the charts there for you in that way. So, you typically have retrograde planets, and especially Mercury retrograde, because of karma in your past lives that you had to deal with. So, maybe you've had problems with communication in past lives. Where you may have been impulsive when it comes to rushing into decisions and communication. You may have very, very easily not have thought before you spoke, or been very, very just sharp and too much with your communication, like you communicated too much, or you were mean, or you didn't consider others when you communicated, or you or you really, really had problems making decisions as you were young. You really, really had difficulties when it comes to decisions, when it comes to being young. And living that past life that you did, but now you're learning to work with the energies of Mercury retrograde more effectively. And as I said before, you have your whole life to work with the themes of Mercury retrograde in your chart, and clean up that past karma, and live a life that is so good and so true for you. So that is all I have to say on Mercury retrograde in the natal chart. I hope that you enjoyed and found a lot of value out of this. I hope that you found it helpful for you as well. Please share this for those who have Mercury retrograde in their charts, or those who are interested in astrology, those who are into this kind of deep astrological content. And I will see you in the next episode of the Cosmic Sky podcast, which could be about many, many different topics. Probably an astrological topic, though I don't know what it's going to be about. Could be about Saturn and Taurus in the natal chart, or it could be about my moon in the 10th house. Whatever I want to share. As opposed to just other than the transit videos, the collective transit on Thursdays, and the transit and how it applies to your sign on Fridays, and then the general astrology videos, and then general videos on Saturdays. Other than that, it's what I really, really wanted to share. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode of the Cosmic Sky podcast.